a city paralyzed by fear, a luxury sports car blocking an entire intersection, and a young woman on her knees in the freezing rain, clutching the collar of her injured dog, refusing to let go. No one expects what happens next. Standing over her is a man in a tailored suit, his face twisted in rage, screaming that she belongs to him and the family she tried to escape. The crowd watches in terrified silence. They know exactly who he is. He is the son of the most dangerous crime lord in the city, and no one dares to intervene. But then, he makes a fatal mistake. He grabs the woman by her hair and drags her across the wet asphalt. When her German shepherd tries to protect her, he delivers a brutal kick to the animal's ribs, sending shockwaves through the onlookers. What he does not know is that the massive figure stepping off a fire truck nearby is not just any firefighter. He is a man with a past that scares even the Mafia. And today is the moment the city's balance of power shifts forever. This story is about betrayal, courage, and the kind of justice that burns brighter than fire. Tell us what time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The late afternoon sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of a violent storm. The air smelled of ozone, exhaust fumes, and the damp scent of approaching rain. On the corner of 5th and Main, the usual bustle of pedestrians had frozen into a circle of uneasy spectators. The wind whipped through the streets, chilling the onlookers, but no one moved. They were held captive by the scene unfolding in the center of the intersection. A bright red Ferrari, polished to a mirror shine, was parked diagonally across 2 lanes, blocking traffic. Horns honked in the distance, but near the car, the silence was deafening. In the center of that circle stood Elena Moretti. She was 26 years old, wearing a muddy search and rescue uniform that was 2 sizes too big for her slender frame. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, strands of it sticking to her forehead with sweat and rain. Beside her sat Duke, a Belgian Malinois with intelligent amber eyes and a vest marked K9 Unit. Elena was not trembling, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was trained to stay calm in collapsing buildings. She was trained to find survivors in the rubble. But the man standing in front of her was more volatile than any structure fire she had ever faced. Leo Moretti, her older brother, looked entirely out of place on the dirty sidewalk. His Italian leather shoes were spotless, despite the puddles forming around them. His charcoal suit cost more than most people's cars, and his face was a mask of arrogant fury. He had the kind of handsome features that turned ugly when he didn't get his way. He stepped closer to Elena, invading her personal space, smelling of expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke. He spoke in a low, venomous hiss that carried over the sound of the wind. He told her she was a disgrace to the name. He told her that playing hero in the mud was over. He told her that father demanded she come home immediately to fulfill her duty to the family. He spoke of duty as if it were a holy word, but Elena knew what it really meant. It meant silence. It meant marriage to a business partner. It meant disappearing into the gilded cage she had fought so hard to escape 5 years ago. Elena stood her ground. She kept a protective hand on Duke's shoulder, her fingers digging into his fur. She signaled the dog to stay with a subtle pressure of her thumb. She looked Leo in the eye, her gaze steady, despite the fear churning in her stomach. She told him quietly that she was never going back. She told him her life belonged to her, not to the syndicate, and not to their father's business partners. Her refusal was not shouted. It was whispered. But in the silence of the street, it hit Leo like a slap in the face. He was a man used to absolute obedience. He was a man who had never been told no without the person saying its suffering consequences. To be defied by his own sister, in public, with witnesses recording on their phones, was an insult his fragile ego could not handle. The veins in Leo's neck bulged. His face flushed a deep, angry red. He lunged forward, grabbing Elena's arm with a grip that bruised instantly. He shouted that she did not have a choice. He shouted that she was property, not a person. He screamed that he would drag her home if he had to. Elena tried to twist away, using a self-defense maneuver she had learned in the academy. She shifted her weight, trying to break his hold. But Leo was fueled by a lifetime of unchecked entitlement and rage. He yanked her hard, throwing her off balance. Elena stumbled, her boots slipping on the wet pavement. Her knees hit the asphalt with a sickening crack. That was when Duke reacted. The dog did not bark. He simply launched himself between Leo and Elena, a low, rumbling growl vibrating deep in his chest. Duke bared his teeth, his ears pinned back, a clear warning to back off. It was the instinct of a protector. Any sane man would have stepped away. Any rational person would have seen the danger in the dog's eyes. But Leo Moretti was not sane. He was humiliated. And a humiliated narcissist is the most dangerous creature on earth. Without a second of hesitation, Leo pulled back his heavy, steel-tipped dress shoe. He swung his leg with all his strength. The kick connected squarely with the dog's ribs. The sound of the impact was a dull, sickening thud that seemed to echo off the nearby buildings. Duke let out a sharp, high-pitched yelp, a sound so full of pain and surprise that it silenced the entire street. The dog was lifted off the ground by the force of the blow. He landed heavily on his side, wheezing, his legs scrambling for purchase on the wet road. Elena screamed. It was a raw, terrified sound that tore through her throat. She scrambled on her hands and knees toward Duke, ignoring the pain in her own legs. Her hands hovered over his side, terrified to touch him and cause more pain. Tears blurred her vision instantly, hot and stinging against the cold rain. She called his name, her voice breaking. Duke tried to lift his head, his tail thumping weakly once, but a wheezing cough racked his body. Pink foam began to form around his muzzle. But Leo was not done. The violence had unlocked something dark inside him. He didn't care about the dog. He didn't care about the crowd. He reached down, entangled his fingers in Elena's long dark hair, and yanked her upward. She cried out in pain as her scalp burned. He dragged her backward, her heels scraping against the asphalt. He shouted that if the dog mattered so much, she could watch it die from the passenger seat of his car. He shouted that she was coming with him, dead or alive. The crowd gasped. People covered their mouths. Phones were held high, recording the assault. But fear kept everyone rooted to the spot. They knew the Moretti name. They knew the stories of people who interfered. Businesses burned, families threatened, disappearances that were never solved. The fear of the Moretti family was woven into the fabric of the city. No one moved. No one spoke. Elena felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. She was alone. Suddenly, a heavy shadow fell over Leo. A large hand, rough, calloused, and stained with soot, clamped down on Leo's wrist. The grip was ironclad, immovable, like a vice made of steel. Leo tried to jerk his hand away, expecting the person to release him immediately. But the hand didn't move. Leo froze. He turned around, ready to scream threats, ready to promise death to whoever dared to touch him. The words died in his throat. Towering over him was Caleb Thorne. Caleb was a lieutenant with the city's fire department, specifically the heavy rescue squad. He was 6'4", broad-shouldered and massive. He was still wearing his turnout gear from a call nearby. Heavy pants, suspenders, a soot-stained t-shirt that clung to his muscular frame. His face was smeared with ash and sweat. But it was his eyes that stopped Leo cold. They were a piercing, icy blue, and they burned with a quiet, terrifying intensity. He did not look like a man who feared consequences. He looked like a man who walked through hell for a living and came out the other side smiling. Caleb did not shout. He did not scream. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble, like thunder before an earthquake. He told Leo to let go. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Leo stared at him, bewildered. He tried to summon his usual arrogance. He sneered, asking if Caleb knew who he was. He asked if Caleb wanted to lose his job, his home, and his life. He asked if Caleb knew whose son he was speaking to. Caleb didn't blink. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the car. He tightened his grip on Leo's wrist until the bones audibly creaked. Leo gasped, his knees buckling slightly from the pressure. His fingers instinctively opened, releasing Elena's hair. Elena fell free, scrambling back toward her injured dog, wrapping her body around Duke to shield him. Caleb stepped into the space between them. He looked down at Leo with pure, unadulterated disgust. He told him that he didn't care about his last name. He told him that he didn't care about his money. He told him that if he ever touched the woman or the animal again, the police would be the least of his problems. The threat was calm, precise, and terrifying, because it wasn't made in anger. It was made with the certainty of a promise. Leo rubbed his wrist, his face flushing with a mix of pain and humiliation. He looked around and saw the crowd. He saw the phones recording his defeat. He saw the way people were looking at him, not with fear anymore, but with judgment. He realized he had lost control of the situation. He realized he couldn't win a physical fight with this giant of a man. He pointed a shaking finger at Caleb, whispering that this was a mistake. A fatal mistake. He hissed that Caleb had just signed his own death warrant. Then he glared at Elena, promising that this wasn't over, before retreating to his red Ferrari. He revved the engine aggressively, a childish display of power, and sped away, leaving the scent of burnt rubber hanging in the wet air. The adrenaline faded from the street, leaving behind a heavy silence. Elena was shaking violently now. The cold rain soaked through her uniform, chilling her to the bone. She crawled back to Duke. The dog was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Every breath sounded wet and painful. Panic seized her chest, tightening it until she couldn't breathe. She looked up, desperate for help, tears streaming down her face mixed with rain. She found Caleb already kneeling beside her. His demeanor had shifted instantly. The terrifying warrior was gone, replaced by a gentle healer. He didn't speak immediately. He touched Duke with surprising tenderness, his large, rough hands checking the dog's gums, feeling his ribcage, assessing the damage with the efficiency of a first responder. He looked at Elena and spoke softly. He told her they needed to move fast. He told her his truck could get them to the emergency vet faster than an ambulance. He told her he wouldn't leave them. The ride to the veterinary hospital was a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and rain slashing against the windshield. Caleb drove his personal heavy-duty truck with expert precision, weaving through gridlock traffic, jumping curbs, and running red lights with careful calculation. Elena sat in the back of the crew cab, holding Duke's head in her lap. Her hands were stained with mud, and the dog's saliva. She whispered promises to him. She told him he was a good boy. She told him he had to hold on. She told him she couldn't do this without him. She noticed Caleb glancing in the rearview mirror. His eyes were filled with concern, not just for the dog, but for her. He passed her a clean towel from the center console. He told her to wipe the mud and blood from her face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask why a Mafia prince was attacking her. He didn't ask what she had done to deserve it. He just drove, his hands steady on the wheel, a silent anchor in the middle of her storm. When they arrived at the animal hospital, the scene was chaotic. Caleb carried Duke in his arms, as if the 80-pound dog weighed nothing. He burst through the doors, shouting for help. Nurses rushed forward. A gurney appeared. The vet, a woman with graying hair and a serious expression, took one look at Duke's pale gums and the way his chest was heaving, and immediately shouted orders. "Code Blue! Get him to trauma now!" They wheeled Duke away through double doors. Elena tried to follow, but a nurse gently held her back. "You can't go back there, honey. Let them work. We need room." The door swung shut, cutting off her view of the only family she had left. Elena stood in the middle of the hallway, frozen. Her clothes were wet. Her hair was a mess. Her arm throbbed where Leo had grabbed her. She felt her legs give out. The floor rushed up to meet her. She would have hit the hard linoleum if Caleb hadn't caught her. He caught her by the elbows, steadying her, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. He guided her to a plastic chair in the waiting room. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making the space feel cold and sterile. The smell of antiseptic stung her nose. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering uncontrollably. She flinched as she touched the sore spot on her scalp where Leo had pulled her hair. Caleb disappeared for a moment and returned with a cup of coffee from the vending machine. It was cheap, watery coffee in a paper cup, but it was hot. He pressed it into her hands. "Drink," he said gently. "You're in shock." He sat down next to her, leaving one empty chair between them, respecting her space. He didn't push. He didn't demand answers. He just sat there, a silent presence, still wearing his dirty turnout gear, ignoring the stares of the other people in the waiting room. Minutes ticked by like hours. The clock on the wall seemed to mock them. Every time the double doors opened, Elena's heart stopped, terrified it would be the vet coming to tell her Duke was gone. To distract herself, or perhaps because the silence was too loud, she began to speak. Her voice was raspy. She didn't look at Caleb. She looked at the steam rising from the coffee cup. She told him everything. She told him about her father, Don Salvatore Moretti. She described the mansion she grew up in, a place of marble floors and cold silences. She described the men who came and went at all hours, the envelopes of cash, the fear in the eyes of the servants. She told him about the day she realized what her father truly was. She was 18, and she had found a man beaten unconscious in their garage. Her father had told her to go back to her room and forget she saw anything. She told Caleb about escaping. She told him about changing her name, cutting her hair, moving to the other side of the city. She told him about finding Duke as a puppy in a shelter, a discarded, aggressive dog that no one wanted. She told him how they saved each other, how training Duke gave her a purpose, how joining the search and rescue team made her feel like she was balancing the scales, saving lives to make up for the lives her family had destroyed. Caleb listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor, absorbing every word. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment. Then he turned his head and looked at her. "You're not them," he said. His voice was firm. "Blood doesn't make you who you are. Actions do. And what I saw today? You stood up to a monster to protect a dog. That tells me everything I need to know." Elena looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes again. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Leo won't stop. He can't let this go. He's going to come for me. He's going to come for you. You should leave. You shouldn't be here." Caleb's expression hardened. He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "Let him come," he said. "I've dealt with bullies my whole life, and I've got a reason not to like the Morettis." He hesitated, then decided to share his own truth. "My father owned a grocery store in Little Italy 20 years ago. A nice place, neighborhood staple. The Morettis came for protection money. My dad refused. He said he was an honest man, and he wouldn't pay criminals." Caleb's jaw tightened. 2 weeks later, the store caught fire in the middle of the night. My dad was inside doing inventory. The fire investigation ruled it accidental. But we knew. Everyone knew. That was the night I decided to become a firefighter. I wanted to stop fires, but I also promised myself that if I ever got the chance to extinguish the men who started them, I would. Elena stared at him, horror and recognition dawning on her face. Their lives were connected by the same thread of violence woven by her father's hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Caleb said. "It's not your fault, but it means I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone in this fight anymore, Elena." Just then, the double doors swung open. The vet stepped out. Her surgical mask was pulled down around her neck. Her apron was stained with blood. Elena shot up from her chair, the coffee spilling onto the floor. She held her breath, waiting for the verdict. The vet looked tired. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "He's alive," she said. Elena let out a sob of relief, her knees buckling again. Caleb was there to steady her. "But," the vet continued, her voice grave, "it's bad. 3 broken ribs, 1 punctured his lung. We had to drain the chest cavity. He's lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours are critical. If he makes it through the night, he has a fighting chance. But he needs absolute quiet. No stress, no movement. Can I see him? Elena asked, her voice trembling. Briefly, the vet said. He's under heavy sedation. Elena walked into the recovery room. It was dimly lit. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. Duke lay on a metal table, covered in heating blankets, tubes running in and out of his body. He looked so small, so fragile. Elena reached out and gently touched his paw. He didn't move. She leaned down and whispered into his ear, "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. You have to fight. You hear me? You have to fight." Caleb stood in the doorway, watching them. He saw the love between the woman and the dog, and he felt a protective rage rising in his chest. He knew Leo Moretti wasn't done. Men like that didn't accept defeat. They escalated. And when Leo came back, he wouldn't just bring a sports car and a bad attitude. He would bring the full force of the criminal underworld. Caleb took out his phone. He looked at the screen. He had one contact he hadn't spoken to in years, a man who knew the Moretti family better than anyone. He hesitated, then hit dial. The war had begun. While Duke fought for his life in the quiet hum of the hospital, Leo Moretti was initiating the next phase of his attack. He stormed into his father's study, a room that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, blocking out the storm. The room smelled of expensive leather and old secrets. Don Salvatore Moretti sat behind his massive mahogany desk. He was an elderly man, frail in appearance, but his eyes were sharp as flint. He was reading a newspaper, his hand steady. Leo didn't knock. He burst in, pacing the room like a caged tiger. He didn't tell the truth. He didn't say, "I kicked a dog and a firefighter humiliated me." He spun a narrative of disrespect. He told his father that Elena was high on drugs. He lied, saying she was living on the streets, shaming the family name. He claimed that when he tried to help her, a corrupt firefighter attacked him, assaulted him without provocation, and threatened the family business. "He put his hands on me, father," Leo spat, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. "In the middle of the street. People saw. If we don't respond, we look weak. The other families, they'll smell blood." Don Salvatore lowered the newspaper slowly. He looked at his son over the rim of his reading glasses. He didn't speak for a long time. The silence stretched until Leo stopped pacing, uncomfortable under the scrutiny. "You let a fireman touch you?" the Don asked, his voice raspy but clear. "He surprised me," Leo lied quickly. "He's huge. A brute. I need permission to handle it. I need to crush him. And I need to bring Elena home. For her own good." The Don studied his son. He knew Leo was reckless. He knew Leo was emotional. But he also knew that in their world, perception was everything. A Moretti could not be disrespected in public. "Do not be messy," the Don said finally, returning to his paper. "Handle the nuisance. Bring your sister home. But if you bring the police to my doorstep, Leonardo, I will handle you myself." Leo smiled. It was a cold, cruel smile. "Don't worry, father. By tomorrow, Caleb Thorne won't even have a job, and Elena will be begging to come back." The attacks began the next morning, and they didn't start with guns. They started with bureaucracy. The system was the first weapon. Caleb arrived at the firehouse early, ready to explain his absence. But before he could even put his bag down, he was met by his captain and two men in cheap suits. Internal Affairs. They didn't smile. They held a folder. "Lieutenant Thorne," one of them said, "we received an anonymous tip this morning. Very detailed. Allegations of you using department resources for illegal activities, selling equipment, taking bribes." Caleb laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "That's a lie. You know who sent this." "It doesn't matter what we know," the captain said, looking pained. "The complaint was filed directly with the commissioner. They have photos, Caleb. Doctored, I'm sure, but they look real enough to open a file." He sighed, handing Caleb a piece of paper. I have to suspend you. Pending investigation. Hand over your badge. Caleb stared at the badge in his hand. He had earned it with sweat and blood. He slammed it onto the desk. He's coming for me, Caleb said to his captain. This is Leo Moretti. I know, the captain whispered. Watch your back, son. This came from way up. At the same moment, across town, Elena was waking up in the plastic chair of the waiting room. Her neck was stiff. She hadn't slept. She checked her phone and saw a notification from her bank. Account frozen. She frowned, tapping the screen. Another notification. Credit card declined. Panic flared. She called the bank. The automated voice told her there was a fraud investigation linked to her social security number. Her assets were locked. Then her phone rang. It was her landlord. He didn't even say hello. You have 24 hours to vacate, he said, his voice nervous. What? Why? I paid rent, Elena argued, standing up. I don't want trouble, Elena. 2 men came by this morning. They said if you were still there tomorrow, the building might have an electrical fire. I have other tenants. I can't risk it. Just go. Please. The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone. She felt the walls closing in. Leo was erasing her. He was taking her money, her home, her stability. He was stripping her of every defense she had, forcing her to be desperate, forcing her to crawl back to him. She looked towards the recovery room doors. She had no money to pay the vet. She had no home to take Duke to. She was exactly where Leo wanted her. Helpless. But she wasn't alone. The doors to the clinic opened, and Caleb walked in. He wasn't wearing his uniform anymore. He was in jeans and a dark jacket. He looked angry, but determined. He saw the look on Elena's face and knew immediately that she had been hit too. They suspended me, he said bluntly. They froze my bank accounts, Elena replied, her voice shaking. And I'm being evicted. Caleb nodded. He didn't look defeated. He looked like he was formulating a plan. He's trying to suffocate us. He wants us to panic. He wants us to make a mistake. Caleb stepped closer. We're not going to give him that satisfaction. Where do we go? Elena asked. I have nowhere. I have a place, Caleb said. My grandfather's old cabin. It's an hour north, off the grid. No internet, no easy roads. It's safe. We can take Duke. The vet said he can be moved if we're careful. Elena looked at him. She had met this man less than 24 hours ago. By all logic, she shouldn't trust him. But he had lost his job for her. He had stood between her and a monster. She nodded. Okay, let's go. They moved Duke into the back of Caleb's truck, creating a makeshift bed with blankets and pillows. The vet, sensing the danger and sympathizing with the situation, agreed to bill them later. Get him safe, she said. I'll pretend he was discharged against medical advice if anyone asks. The drive north was a journey into silence. The city skyline, usually a beacon of light, faded into the rear-view mirror, swallowed by the gray mist of the storm. Caleb drove with one eye on the road and one eye on the mirrors, constantly checking for headlights that might be following too closely. The heavy-duty truck hummed beneath them, a steady vibration that felt like the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned to quicksand. In the back seat, Duke slept a drug-induced sleep, his breathing shallow but rhythmic. Elena sat in the passenger seat, her knees pulled up to her chest. She watched the raindrops race across the glass, tracing the path of each one, trying to keep her mind from spiraling into terror. They arrived at the cabin just as night fully claimed the sky. It was a modest structure, built of rough-hewn logs and stone, hidden at the end of a long gravel driveway that wound through a dense forest of pine. It looked forgotten by time, but to Elena, it looked like a fortress. Caleb killed the engine. The silence of the woods was immediate and overwhelming, broken only by the sound of wind moving through the treetops. We're safe here, he said, his voice low. No cell service. No neighbors. No one knows this place exists except me. Getting Duke inside was a delicate operation. Caleb moved with a gentleness that contradicted his massive size. He lifted the 80-pound dog as if he were carrying a child, careful not to jostle the injured ribs. Elena rushed ahead to open the door. The air inside was stale and cold, smelling of sawdust and wood smoke from winters past. They settled Duke on a rug near the stone fireplace. Elena immediately set up a makeshift triage station, arranging the medications the vet had given them, checking the dog's gums, listening to his heart. Only when she was sure he was stable did she allow herself to sit back on her heels and exhale. Caleb busied himself with the practicalities of survival. He went outside to the woodpile, the sound of his axe splitting logs echoing rhythmically through the night. It was a primal sound, a steady thwack-crack that signaled life. When he returned, his arms laden with firewood, he knelt before the hearth and built a fire. The flames caught slowly, then roared to life, casting dancing shadows against the log walls. The warmth began to chase away the chill of the rain and the deeper, colder chill of fear. He made them a simple meal, canned soup heated over a camping stove because he didn't want to risk turning on the main power grid and creating an electrical signature. They ate in silence for a while, sitting on the floor near the fire, watching the flames consume the wood. The exhaustion was setting in, a heavy weight pulling at their eyelids. But the adrenaline was still there, a low hum in their blood. "Why?" Elena asked suddenly. Her voice was quiet, barely rising above the crackle of the fire. She looked at Caleb, the firelight illuminating the sharp angles of his face, and the soot still smudged on his jaw. "You lost your job today. You're hiding in the woods with a woman you just met. You have a target on your back. Why didn't you just walk away?" Caleb set his bowl down. He stared into the fire, his blue eyes reflecting the orange glow. He looked older in this light, the weight of his past visible in the set of his shoulders. "I told you about my father's store," he began, his voice rough. "But I didn't tell you the rest." He paused, as if measuring how much to share. "The night the store burned down, I was 16. I was supposed to be there helping him with inventory. But I skipped out to go to a party with my friends. I thought I had time." He picked up a piece of wood and turned it over in his huge hands. "When I saw the smoke from down the street, I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I tried to get in the back door, but the heat was like a physical wall. The firefighters held me back. I screamed at them to go in, but the roof was already collapsing. I stood there and watched my father die because a man named Moretti decided $500 a week was more important than a human life." Elena covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The connection between them wasn't just happenstance. It was fate. "It was my uncle," she whispered. "Uncle Marco. He ran the protection rackets in Little Italy back then. My father, he probably signed the order." "I know," Caleb said. He looked at her then, and there was no anger in his gaze, only a deep, weary understanding. "For years I carried that guilt. I became a firefighter to save people, to make up for the one person I couldn't save. But today, when I saw Leo kick that dog, when I saw him put his hands on you, it wasn't just a dog. It wasn't just a woman. It was the same bully, the same fire, the same evil. I walked away once, Elena. I'm not walking away again." Elena reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was rough, hers was soft, but in that moment they were forged of the same steel. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving us." "We're not saved yet," Caleb said grimly. "Leo is just getting started." He was right. While the fire crackled peacefully in the cabin, 50 miles away, the war was escalating. Leo Moretti sat in the back of a black SUV, watching a house burn. It was a small, neat house in the suburbs, with a white picket fence and a well-tended garden. It was Caleb Thorne's house. Leo had found the address in the stolen police files. He had sent 3 of his enforcers with gasoline canisters. Now, he watched with a glass of champagne in his hand, as the flames licked up the siding and shattered the windows. He took a picture of the burning house with his phone. He typed a short message. War has a cost. He sent it to the number he had pulled from the fire department records. He smiled as the message marked as delivered. He didn't care that the house was empty. This wasn't about murder. Not yet. This was about psychological warfare. He wanted Caleb to know that there was no sanctuary. He wanted him to know that everything he loved could be turned to ash. Back at the cabin, Caleb's phone buzzed. It was a burner phone he kept for emergencies, but he had forwarded his main line to it. He looked at the message. The color drained from his face. He didn't say a word. He simply turned the screen toward Elena. She saw the photo. The flames against the night sky. The familiar structure of a home destroyed. She gasped, a sound of pure horror. "Oh my God!" she cried. "Your house! Caleb, your house!" Caleb stood up. He walked to the window and stared out into the dark woods. His hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. The veins in his forearms stood out like cords. He wasn't sad. He was past sadness. He was in a place of cold, calculated rage. "It's just wood and brick," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "But he thinks this scares me. He thinks this makes me want to quit." He turned back to Elena. "He just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thinks fire is his weapon. He forgets. Fire is my element." "We have to stop," Elena pleaded, standing up to go to him. "He'll kill you next. I'll go back. I'll call Leo. I'll tell him I'll come home if he leaves you alone." Caleb grabbed her shoulders. "No," he commanded. "Listen to me. If you go back, he wins. If you go back, Duke died for nothing. If you go back, my father died for nothing. We don't surrender to men like him. We burn them down." "But how?" Elena asked, desperate. "He has an army. He has the judges. He has the money. We have a truck and a sick dog." "We have something he doesn't expect," Caleb said. "We have the truth. And we have help." The next morning broke with a gray steel light. The rain had stopped, leaving the woods damp and silent. Caleb was already awake, pacing the small living room. He had a map spread out on the table. He had called in the only marker he had left. At 10:06 a.m., the sound of a gravel-crunching engine signaled an arrival. Elena tensed, reaching for a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, but Caleb shook his head. "It's okay. He's a friend." The door opened and a man stepped in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He wore a rumpled trench coat and smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. This was Marcus. Once a decorated detective, now a private investigator who worked out of the back of a laundromat. He had been kicked off the force 3 years ago for obsessively investigating the Moretti family. He had lost his badge, his pension, and his wife, all because he refused to stop looking for the bodies Don Salvatore had buried. Marcus looked at Caleb, then at Elena, then at the sleeping dog. He let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, his voice raspy, "you really stepped in it this time, Thorne. Kidnapping the Don's daughter? That's a bold move." "I didn't kidnap her," Caleb said. "I saved her." "Potato! Potato!" Marcus muttered, dropping a heavy duffel bag on the table. "Whatever you call it, the whole city is looking for you. The police have an APB out for your truck. Leo has a bounty on your head. 500 grand, dead or alive." Elena flinched at the number. $500,000? "You're a valuable lady." Marcus grinned without humor. He unzipped the bag. Inside was a high-tech laptop, several hard drives, and a police scanner. "But here's the good news. Leo is sloppy. He's angry. And angry men make mistakes." Marcus booted up the laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim cabin. "I've been tracking Leo's movements since Caleb called me last night. While he was busy burning down your house, he forgot to encrypt his digital footprint." Marcus tapped a few keys. A map of the city appeared, covered in red dots. These are his movements over the last month. Warehouses, the docks, private airstrips, places that have nothing to do with the family's legitimate olive oil business. Eleanor stepped closer to the screen. She studied the locations, her brow furrowed. "That warehouse on 4th Street," she said, pointing. "That's not ours. I mean, it's not the family's. My father shut down operations there years ago. He said the foundation was unstable." "Exactly," Marcus said, "but Leo has been visiting it twice a week, usually at 3 a.m. And look at the shipping manifest associated with that address." He pulled up a spreadsheet. "Medical supplies. Industrial solvents." Elena's eyes went wide. "Fentanyl," she whispered. "It has to be. The precursors for synthetic opioids." Caleb looked at her. "Does your father know?" "No." Elena shook her head vigorously. "Absolutely not. My father is... He's a monster, yes. But he has a code. Old world rules. No drugs. He saw what heroin did to the neighborhoods in the 70s. He forbade it. He said it brings too much heat from the feds. If anyone in the family touches drugs, the punishment is death." The room fell silent. The realization hung in the air like smoke. They had found the wedge. They had found the one thing that could turn the king against the prince. "Leo is running a side hustle," Caleb said, connecting the dots. "He's using the family infrastructure to smuggle drugs behind his father's back. He's greedy." "He wants to prove he's smarter than the old man," Marcus added. "He wants to build his own empire before the Don dies, but he needs capital. That's why he's so desperate to get Elena back. It's not about love. It's not even about control." "It's about the trust fund," Elena realized, her hand going to her mouth. "My mother left me a trust. It unlocks when I turn 26 or when I get married. It's millions. Leo has been trying to get me to sign power of attorney over to him for years. He needs that money to pay his suppliers." "Bingo," Marcus said. "He's leveraged up to his eyeballs. If he doesn't pay the cartel supplier by the end of the month, he's a dead man. He needs you to sign those papers." Caleb paced the room. "Okay, so we know what he's doing, but knowing it isn't enough. We need proof. Irrefutable proof. If we just go to the police, the Moretti lawyers will bury it. If we go to the Don empty-handed, he'll kill us for lying." "We need the ledger," Elena said. "Leo keeps a digital ledger of all his side deals. He's paranoid. He writes everything down in case he needs to blackmail his partners." "Where is it?" Marcus asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "It's not in the cloud," Elena said. "It's on a server, an encrypted drive, physically located in his penthouse, behind the wall of the master bathroom. I saw him access it once when I was a teenager." Marcus groaned. "The penthouse? That place is a fortress. Retina scanners, armed guards. It's suicide." "We don't need to break in," Caleb said, a plan forming in his mind. His eyes were cold and sharp. "We don't need to steal the ledger. We need him to show it to us. We need him to confess." "And how do we do that?" Elena asked. "Ask him nicely?" "No." Caleb turned to the map. "We corner him. We force him into a position where he has to defend himself. Where is he going to be next?" Marcus checked the social media feeds. Saturday night, the City Hero Gala. It's a massive charity event for the Police Benevolent Association. Leo is the keynote speaker. He's donating $1 million to the police pension fund. He's trying to buy the cops' loyalty, so they look the other way on the drug shipments. "He wants to be the hero," Caleb muttered. "He wants the applause." "The gala is at the Ritz-Carlton," Marcus noted. "Security will be tight. Metal detectors. Private security plus police presence." "It's perfect," Caleb said. "Perfect?" Marcus looked at him like he was insane. "It's a trap." "It's a stage," Caleb corrected. "Leo craves attention. He's going to be live streaming the speech. The press will be there. The cameras will be rolling. If we can get in there, if we can hijack that feed, we can show the world who he really is, not just the drugs. The video of the attack, the kick, the abuse. We strip him naked in front of the whole city. And in front of his father, Elena added softly. My father always watches the gala from his private box. He never misses a chance to see the family honored. So, the plan is to crash a room filled with cops and mobsters, hack a secure feed, and expose a psychopath, all while being the most wanted people in Chicago? Marcus summarized dryly. Pretty much, Caleb said. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then a slow, shark-like grin spread across his face. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a bottle of cheap whiskey. I'm in. Let's burn this bastard down. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. The cabin transformed into a war room. Marcus worked the digital angle, writing code to bypass the Ritz-Carlton's AV firewall. He used the police scanner to monitor the search for Caleb's truck, guiding them on when to move and when to freeze. Caleb prepared the physical gear. He didn't have guns. He was a firefighter, not a soldier. He had axes, ropes, Halligan bars, and flashlights. Tools of rescue that could double as weapons of defense. He sharpened the axe blade until it could shave the hair off his arm. He checked the pressure on the oxygen tanks. He packed a medical kit. Elena worked on the narrative. She sat with Marcus, sorting through the downloaded files they managed to scrape from Leo's shell companies. She found the emails. She found the shipping routes. She found the timestamps that matched the attacks. She was building the story that would destroy her brother. It was painful work. Every document was a reminder of the corruption she came from. But every time she looked at Duke, who was now lifting his head and drinking water on his own, her resolve hardened. On the night before the gala, the storm outside had finally cleared, leaving a sky full of stars. Elena walked out to the porch where Caleb was standing guard. The air was crisp and cold. Are you afraid? She asked him. Caleb turned. He didn't lie. Yes. If we mess this up, we don't walk out of that hotel. You don't have to do this, Elena said. You could drop me off at a police station in another state. You could disappear. Start over. Caleb stepped closer to her. The distance between them had shrunk over the last 2 days. The shared trauma, the shared purpose, it had pulled them together like gravity. He reached out and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. His touch was gentle, a stark contrast to the violence of the world around them. I told you, he said softly. I'm done running. And I'm not leaving you. We started this together. We finish it together. Elena looked up at him. She saw the strength in his jaw, the kindness in his eyes. In another life, they might have met at a coffee shop. They might have gone on dates, watched movies, lived a normal life. But in this life, they were soldiers in a trench. She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. When this is over, she whispered, if we survive, I want to buy you a new house. One with a big yard for Duke. But Caleb smiled, a rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I'd like that, he said. But first, we have a gala to crash. Back in the city, Leo Moretti stood in front of a mirror in his penthouse. He adjusted his silk tie. He practiced his smile. It was a winning smile, charming and warm. He practiced his speech. We must stand together against chaos, he recited to his reflection. He felt invincible. Caleb Thorne was gone, hiding in a hole somewhere. Elena was broke and desperate. Tonight, he would cement his legacy. He would be the face of the future. He checked his phone. No new messages from his hitmen. That was fine. He would find them eventually. Tonight was about glory. He didn't know that 50 miles away, a firefighter, a disowned heiress, and a disgraced cop were loading a truck. He didn't know that the chaos he spoke about was coming for him. And he didn't know that the fire he started was about to consume him whole. The drive back to the city was tense. Marcus drove a nondescript van he used for surveillance, while Caleb and Elena lay in the back, hidden under tarps and equipment. They listened to the police radio. Unit 4 Alpha, securing perimeter at the Ritz-Carlton. VIPs arriving. Copy, 4 Alpha. Keep eyes open for the suspect vehicle. Red Ford truck. They're looking for the truck, Caleb whispered in the dark. Good thing we left it in the woods. They parked 3 blocks away in an alley behind a Chinese restaurant. The smell of frying oil masked the smell of their fear. Marcus handed them earpieces. Okay, he said, tapping his laptop. I'm plugging into the grid. I can loop the security cameras in the loading dock for 60 seconds. That's your window. If you're not inside by then, you're on camera. 60 seconds, Caleb nodded. He looked at Elena. She was wearing a black dress she had bought at a thrift store on the way down, hidden under a heavy coat. She looked beautiful and terrifyingly determined. Ready? Caleb asked. Elena took a deep breath. She thought of Duke, limping but alive. She thought of the fear in her landlord's voice. She thought of her father's cold eyes. She nodded. Ready. They moved through the alley shadows. The service entrance of the Ritz-Carlton loomed ahead. A massive steel door, a security camera blinking red above it. Mark! Marcus's voice crackled in their ears. Looping cameras in 3, 2, 1. Go! Caleb moved fast. He reached the door and used a specialized firefighter's tool, a shove knife, to slip the latch. It was a technique used to enter buildings without causing damage. The lock clicked. The door swung open. They slipped inside into the humid, noisy world of the hotel kitchens. Chefs were shouting orders. Waiters were rushing with trays of silver. Steam rose from massive pots. No one looked at them. They looked like staff or delivery people, moving with purpose. They navigated the maze of stainless steel, heading towards the service elevator that led to the ballroom level. Elevator is clear, Marcus said. But there are 2 guards at the top floor landing. Armed. Caleb looked at Elena. Stay behind me. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. 2 men in black suits turned, surprised. They saw a giant of a man in a tuxedo that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Before they could reach for their radios, Caleb was on them. It was a blur of motion. A throat punch. A sweep of the leg. He didn't kill them. He neutralized them with the efficiency of a man who knew exactly how the human body broke. He dragged them into the elevator and hit the basement button. Clear, Caleb breathed, adjusting his cuffs. They stood before the double doors of the grand ballroom. Inside, they could hear the applause. They could hear Leo's voice booming over the speakers. And that is why, Leo was saying, I am pledging this donation to protect our streets from the animals who seek to destroy us. Elena looked at Caleb. She took his hand. Her palm was sweating, but her grip was strong. Time to show them who the animal really is, she said. Caleb pushed the doors open. The light from the ballroom spilled out, blindingly bright. They stepped into the lion's den. The double doors of the grand ballroom swung open with a heavy, resonant thud that cut through the polite applause like a gunshot. The light from the crystal chandeliers spilled out into the hallway, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Inside, the room was a sea of black ties, sequined gowns, and the smell of expensive perfume and champagne. 500 of the city's most influential people, politicians, police captains, judges, and business tycoons, turned their heads in unison. At the threshold stood Caleb and Elena. They were a jarring contrast to the polished elegance of the room. Caleb, even in his tuxedo, looked dangerous. His knuckles were bruised, his stance wide and ready for violence. Beside him, Elena stood with her chin high. She wore the black dress like armor, her face pale but her eyes burning with a cold, fierce determination. She was no longer the girl crying in the rain. She was an avenging angel returning to the hell she had escaped. On the stage, Leo Moretti froze. His hand was raised in a gesture of false humility, basking in the adoration of the crowd. His smile, practiced and perfect a moment ago, faltered. It twitched at the corners, transforming into a rictus of confusion and dawning horror. He blinked, as if hoping the vision of his sister and her protector would vanish like a bad dream. But they didn't vanish. They stepped forward, into the light, walking down the center aisle. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. The orchestra stopped playing. The waiters froze with trays of hors d'oeuvres suspended in mid-air. The only sound was the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of Elena's heels on the marble floor, and the heavy, deliberate tread of Caleb's boots. Leo leaned into the microphone. His voice cracked, losing its smooth baritone quality. "Security!" he croaked, then cleared his throat and shouted, louder this time, panic creeping into his tone. "Security! Remove these intruders! They are dangerous!" Two uniformed guards near the stage moved to intercept them. They were big men, hired muscle paid for by the family trust. They reached for their holsters. Caleb didn't slow down. He didn't even flinch. He kept his eyes locked on Leo. "Don't," he said to the guards. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the guards hesitate. "Unless you want to be on the news tonight as accomplices to a federal crime, I suggest you step aside." The guards paused, looking from Caleb to Leo, unsure of the dynamic shifting beneath their feet. In that split second of hesitation, Marcus, sitting in the van 3 blocks away, hit the enter key on his laptop. "Showtime," Marcus whispered into the earpiece. The massive digital screen behind Leo, which had been displaying the logo of the Moretti Family Foundation, a golden shield representing protection, suddenly glitched. The image distorted, tearing into pixels of static. A high-pitched screech of audio feedback tore through the speakers, causing guests to cover their ears and wince. Leo spun around, staring at the screen. "Cut it!" he screamed at the tech booth. "Cut the feed!" But the tech crew was locked out. The static cleared, replaced by a time-stamped video feed. It was grainy at first, then sharpened into high definition. It was the intersection of 5th and Main. The rain was visible, slashing across the lens. The crowd in the ballroom gasped collectively as they recognized the scene. They saw Elena on her knees. They saw the fear in her posture. Then they saw Leo. He looked monstrous on the giant screen, his face twisted in hate. The audio played, clear and undeniable. "You are property! You belong to me!" The words echoed off the vaulted ceiling of the ballroom, stripping away the veneer of the sophisticated philanthropist Leo had been playing minutes ago. Then came the kick. On the screen, Leo's leg swung back and connected with Duke's ribs. The sound of the impact, that sickening wet thud, was amplified by the ballroom's concert-quality speakers. It hit the audience like a physical blow. A woman in the front row screamed. Men looked away. The brutality of the act, the violence against a helpless animal protecting its owner, shattered the illusion of civility. Leo stood on stage, shrinking under the gaze of 500 people. He looked small. He looked weak. "It's a deep fake!" he yelled, his voice shrill and desperate. "It's AI! They generated it! They are trying to frame me!" But the video changed. The street scene faded, replaced by a scrolling wall of documents, spreadsheets, bank transfers, emails. Caleb stopped walking 10 feet from the stage. He raised his voice, projecting it to the back of the room without a microphone. "Is the bank ledger a deep fake, Leo?" Caleb asked. "Are the shipping manifests fake? Look at the dates." The screen zoomed in on a specific document. It was a shipping order for a container marked Industrial Solvent. The destination was the abandoned warehouse on 4th Street. The contents listed in the fine print were chemical precursors. "Fentanyl," Caleb announced, the word hanging in the air like poison. "You're not just a domestic abuser, Leo. You're a drug trafficker. You've been using the family foundation to launder money for the cartel. You've been poisoning the very city you claim to protect." The room erupted. The police captain, who had been shaking Leo's hand 10 minutes ago, stood up, his face turning purple with rage. The politicians began to back away, checking their phones, signaling their PR teams. The betrayal was total. Leo hadn't just committed a crime. He had made fools of everyone in the room. Leo looked around, his eyes darting wildly. He saw his world collapsing. The applause was gone. The admiration was dead. All that was left was judgment. He looked at Elena. She was standing next to Caleb, watching him with a look of profound pity. That pity broke him. He reached inside his tuxedo jacket. He didn't pull out a phone. He didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a silver pistol, a customized Beretta. "No!" someone screamed. Leo pointed the gun directly at Elena. His hand was shaking violently. "You did this!" he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "You ungrateful little traitor! I built this! I saved this family! I did what the old man was too weak to do!" Caleb moved instantly. He didn't dive for cover. He stepped directly in front of Elena, placing his massive body between the bullet and the woman he had sworn to protect. He stood tall, presenting a wall of muscle and resolve. He stared down the barrel of the gun, his blue eyes calm. "Go ahead," Caleb said softly, his voice cutting through the panic. "Pull the trigger. Add murder to the list. But know this, you're not walking out of here. It's over, Leo." Leo's finger tightened on the trigger. Sweat poured down his forehead. He was cornered. He was terrified. He was dangerous. The tension in the room was suffocating. Security guards had their weapons drawn, but couldn't fire with so many civilians in the crossfire. Then a sound cut through the chaos. A rhythmic, heavy thud. Thud! Thud! It was the sound of a cane hitting the floor. From the shadows of the VIP box on the mezzanine level, a figure emerged. He walked slowly to the railing. Don Salvatore Moretti, the patriarch. He was dressed in an old-fashioned black suit, impeccable and severe. He looked down at the stage, his face a mask of stone. The room fell silent again. A different kind of silence. The silence of respect and fear. "Leonardo," the Don said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His voice was raspy, damaged by years of cigars, but it carried the authority of a judge pronouncing a death sentence. Leo looked up, his gun wavering. Father, they're lying. It's a setup. I did it for us. I did it to make us stronger." Don Salvatore looked at the screen, where the drug manifests were still displayed. He looked at the bank transfers. "I checked the books this morning," the Don said. "The numbers match." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "I gave you one order. No poison. We sell protection. We sell vice. But we do not sell death to children." "Times have changed," Leo yelled, tears streaming down his face now. "There's no money in protection anymore. I was saving us." "You were stealing," the Don corrected him. "You stole from me. You stole from your sister. And you attacked a member of this family." The Don's eyes shifted to Elena. For a brief moment, the mask slipped. There was regret there. There was a silent apology for the years of blindness. Then he looked at Caleb. He saw the firefighter standing in front of his daughter, willing to take a bullet. The Don nodded once. It was a microscopic movement, but in their world, it meant everything. It meant respect. "Put the gun down, my son," the Don said. "Do not force me to do something we both regret." "I can't," Leo sobbed. "I can't go to jail." "You have no choice," the Don said. He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. From the side entrances of the ballroom, men in dark suits emerged. They weren't police. They were the Don's personal guard. But at the same moment, the main doors burst open again. A SWAT team, led by the police captain who had signaled them, flooded the room. "Drop the weapon! Police! Drop it now!" Leo looked at his father's men. He looked at the police. He looked at Caleb and Elena. He realized he was entirely alone. The gun slipped from his sweating fingers. It clattered onto the stage floor with a hollow sound. Leo collapsed to his knees, burying his face in his hands, sobbing. Two officers rushed forward, tackling him, cuffing his hands behind his back. As they dragged him away, he was still screaming excuses, a man broken by his own greed. The ballroom was chaos. Guests were rushing for the exits. Reporters were shouting questions. But in the center of the storm, Caleb turned to Elena. He checked her face, her arms. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she whispered, her eyes still fixed on the empty stage where her brother had just been destroyed. "It's over." They turned to leave, but a figure blocked their path. Don Salvatore had descended the stairs. He stood supported by his cane, flanked by 2 large bodyguards. The crowd parted around them, giving them a wide berth. The Don looked at Elena. He looked older than she remembered, smaller. "Elena," he said. "Father," she replied. Her voice was steady. She wasn't seeking his approval anymore. "You look..." The Don searched for the word. "Strong. You look strong." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He held it out to her. "Your mother's ring. Leo took it from the safe. It belongs to you." Elena took the pouch. She didn't open it. "I'm not coming back," she said. "You know that." "I know," the Don said. He looked at Caleb. He looked him up and down, measuring him. "You are the Firefighter, the one whose father owned the store on 4th Street. Caleb stiffened, his jaw clenching. "Yeah, that's me." The Don nodded slowly. "I cannot bring back the dead, and I cannot undo the past. But today you saved my daughter, and you stopped my son from destroying my legacy." The Don reached into his jacket again and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Caleb. It was blank, except for a phone number embossed in gold. "If you ever need a fire put out, or started, you call." Caleb took the card. He looked at it, then looked the Don in the eye. He slowly tore the card in half. "I put fires out, Mr. Moretti. I don't start them. We're even. Stay away from us." He dropped the pieces of the card on the floor. The Don stared at the torn paper. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Fair enough," he murmured. "Go, before the feds start asking questions I cannot answer." Caleb took Elena's hand. They walked out of the ballroom, past the cameras, past the police, past the ruin of the Moretti dynasty. They walked out into the cool night air. The storm had completely passed. The stars were out, 6 months later. The autumn leaves were turning gold and crimson in the park. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and apples. A group of children were playing near the fountain, their laughter ringing clear in the afternoon sun. Elena sat on a park bench, wrapping a warm scarf around her neck. She looked healthy, her cheeks flushed with color. The shadows under her eyes were gone. Beside her sat Caleb. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or turnout gear. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, his arm draped casually over the back of the bench behind Elena. "Go get it, boy!" Caleb shouted, throwing a bright yellow tennis ball. Duke exploded across the grass. The German Shepherd moved with a joyous, fluid grace. There was no limp. The fur over his ribs had grown back thick and dark, hiding the scars of that night. He caught the ball on the first bounce, spun around in the air, and raced back to them, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Duke dropped the slobbery ball in Elena's lap and barked, demanding another throw. Elena laughed, scratching him behind the ears. "You're insatiable," she told the dog. "He's making up for lost time," Caleb said, smiling at them. Elena looked at Caleb. The renovation on the farmhouse was almost done. Caleb had rebuilt it with his own hands, with help from Marcus, who had used the reward money from Leo's capture to open a legitimate security firm. It was a good life. It was a quiet life. "I got a letter today," Elena said softly. Caleb's smile faded slightly. "From prison?" "No," Elena shook her head. "From the new police commissioner. They're naming the new K9 training facility after Duke, and they released the trust fund. My mother's money. It's clean. The lawyers verified it." Caleb looked at her. "That's a lot of money, Elena. You could go anywhere. Paris, Rome." Elena picked up the tennis ball. She looked at the park, at the city skyline in the distance, and then at the man sitting beside her, the man who had risked everything for a stranger and a dog. "I don't want to go to Paris," she said. "I was thinking, the farmhouse needs a barn for more rescue dogs. There are a lot of dogs out there that need a second chance. Like Duke. Like me." Caleb took her hand. His grip was warm and solid. A barn sounds good. I can build a barn. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. They watched Duke roll in the grass, legs kicking at the sky in pure, unadulterated happiness. The nightmare of the rain-slicked intersection felt like a lifetime ago. The fear was gone, replaced by something stronger, something that couldn't be broken by threats or violence. "We made it," she whispered. "Yeah," Caleb said, kissing the top of her head. "We did." The camera pans up from the couple and the dog, rising above the trees, above the buildings, to the wide open sky. The sun is setting, painting the clouds in brilliant shades of orange and purple, a fire in the sky that doesn't burn, but warms. This story reminds us that true family isn't determined by blood, but by who stands beside you when the world is falling apart. It reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And sometimes the heroes don't wear capes. They wear turnout gear, and they have 4 legs. If this story moved you, if you believe that every dog deserves a fighting chance, and every bully deserves to fall, hit that like button and share this with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice, redemption, and love. Thanks for watching. See you next time.